Welcome to Beyond Perception. My name is Simon, and I'm really looking forward to a discovery journey into creativity and our creative nature. And it is a real pleasure and a real honor to welcome Robert Fritz today. Mr. Fritz, you are an accomplished composer, a filmmaker, and also an organizational consultant for some of the largest companies in the world. You are an author of many books, such as The Path of Least Resistance, and you have developed basically the creative process. So yeah, welcome today. It is a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here, Simon.
Yeah, so one could say you are the legend of the creative process. And from what I know, you have been taught, or basically tens, if not hundred thousands of people throughout the world have taken trainings developed by you. So when you wrote me in your email that you're soon going to be 80, I was quite surprised. Yeah. And no, yeah, and like on the one hand, a big congratulations to you, to your amazing career and the body of work you put together. But then also, to still look like, I don't know, 50 or 60. Yeah, well, to be honest. Yeah.
Just imagine it all white, and I probably look my age.
Creativity must be a fountain of youth, I thought. Yeah,
I think it is, though. I think you're right. Yeah. And so what should we talk about?
Yeah, so one of the questions, like, I mean, when you told me you're going to be 80, I was, wow, okay, that's quite some years, and I was curious, if when you look back over all those years, and I shared a little bit the immense body of work you put together, like what are you most proud of?
What I'm going to do next.
Okay. Okay. Tell us more.
Yeah, I don't reminisce a lot. I mean, certainly I appreciate the body of work that I created, and I think it's quite important and significant, but I don't spend time thinking about it, but I do live it. And I spend a lot of my time writing music, making films, certainly teaching courses and writing. And once I turn 80, which will be a year from now, I'm going to stop doing as many workshops as I'm doing now and spend more of my time composing, writing, filmmaking, and so on. But even now, I've got a number of projects going. This past year, I started to, I hadn't written a lot of concert music in a long time. I'd mostly written film music and so on and so on. And my background is as a composer. I have a bachelor's and master's in composition from Boston Conservatory. And I decided to write some concert music. I wrote 6 string quartets, 9 piano sonatas, a piano concerto, a number of chamber works. And what I'm trying to do there, excuse me, is I'm just focusing on this body of work I want to create in music and the classical side. But in the meantime, with a partner, we've also written a musical show, a Christmas show for kids, which will be premiered in Atlanta, Georgia, in this December. So I'm totally active. In October, I go to Japan, and there's a film there I want to make that we'll be making. So that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm not thinking too much about the past. I'm not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I didn't know this until recently that you have this composing background, and that's also how you started discovering those creative principles. You then went to basically teach, and maybe you can share a little bit about how you came up with those principles. Was it putting an intuitive understanding or knowing into basically a concept, which then enables? No.
No. Okay. So to put it in steps, step 1 is actually learning how to compose. Which, if you spend 6 years in the conservatory, you ought to know something. Okay, so then I was teaching at New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. I was teaching composition. And I began to wonder if the same principles we were using in writing music could be used by anyone in creating their lives. So I developed a course and I taught teachers to teach the course. And around Boston, there were many people who took the course. And some of those people were from MIT, Sloan School of Management. And then I got invited to form a company with Peter Senge and a guy named Charlie Kiefer and another guy named David Peter Stroh, called Innovation Associates. And then we started working on the organizational level and combining the understanding of system dynamics, which is what Peter's expertise is, and what I then developed as structural dynamics, how structure works. But I would say that everything I do comes in one way or another from music, how music works. So here's the question. I mean, the question is, can people create their lives and their organizations the same way we make a painting, make a film, do a photograph, write music? And the answer is yes. If you use the same principles, it's very different than how most of us were taught how to live our lives.
Yeah, I shared that before briefly, that I myself am discovering my own abilities, and also what I came here to like share or explore and create in a sense. But that's a very recent phenomena compared to the 30 years.
Well, you don't know what you don't know until you do know it, and then once you know it, then that can change things.
And maybe for those of the listeners who are not yet familiar with your work in detail, could you briefly elaborate what you also differentiate between creativity and creating? And from what I understand, that's a very important distinction. Could you maybe just
Sorry, I froze.
Oh, yeah, I'm back. So I was just asking if you would mind to just share a brief overview about what you're teaching or what you're sharing. What are those creative principles? And you also have this distinction between creativity and creating, right?
Yeah. Well, let me first talk about the basics of the creative process. And the basics are, there's something you want to create, a creation. And the second part of that is, where are you now in relationship to that creation you want to make? And the difference between the desired state and the actual state creates a tension, a very useful tension. You see, I don't have a rubber band, but I have a mask. So I'll show you, it creates a tension.
That's creativity.
And, sometimes people incorrectly call that a gap. And it's not. A gap is the absence of something. This is the presence of something, a useful tension. The same as an archer stretches a bow, aiming the arrow at the target. With the inadequate tension, without enough tension, you can't reach the target. In structural dynamics, we understand that tension always seeks resolution. It's a state of non-equilibrium that's seeking equilibrium. That's the physics of it, as it were. Now, if you are really clear about these two data points, what I want, where I am in relationship to what I want, and you start to take action on behalf of what you want, of course, reality changes as you get closer and you learn things and so on. And the probable outcome in working with that structure, which we call structural tension, by the way, is that then becomes the foundation of the creative process. Now, the reason why that's not creativity is, as it's often talked about, is when I wrote my book, Creating, I was booked on a lot of conferences on creativity. And I found they had nothing in common with the guys who do creativity. They're about psychology and neuroscience, and none of them are from the arts. And they really didn't understand the creative process. They'd never been in a studio at 2:00 in the morning trying to get the track just right. They've never been in a play going on for a year and every night they have to make it fresh. They've never had to work with a second theme of a symphony to get it just right for the first theme. They've never had to work in a second act of a screenplay. You know, these are the things that actual professional creators do. They really know how to create. We don't think it's surprising that plumbers know how to plumb or electricians know how to do electricity, but that creators know how to create. Wow. And so there's a lot of misconceptions around the creativity people in terms of the actual creative process. They think it's freeing the mind. They think that when we were children, we were very creative and then we had that creativity, you know, drummed out of us. And if only we could get back to that childhood mentality, we would be more creative. What they leave out is that adults are more creative than children. Very few children have written the great operas, screenplays, made the great buildings, you know, done epic films. This is not the realm of children, which just state the obvious. Even Mozart and Mendelssohn, who were probably the two most gifted child proteges that ever existed in history, were better composers when they got older. Instead of freeing the mind in free association and what they think is important, what we do in the creative process is we focus the mind. And that focus then generates, let me say that we have structural tension, we have an end result, we have current reality, and then we have an action plan to move from here to there. Let's say in current reality, we don't have enough time or money to accomplish this outcome, which is typical in, like, for example, organizations, but also in most people's lives. So what does that mean, you don't have enough time and money? It means to get this result in the conventional way. So if you can't get there in a conventional way, this motivates innovation and invention. So if conventional means are available, great. But if they're not, we then invent ways to get there, to create. And that really is the essence of the creative process, and even the essence of true creativity, because the creativity is not the free association of ideas. It is a direct invention to move from where you are to where you want to be, given the limitations of where you are.
And I mean, you're also right about that, but then like from that also follows that whatever you experience is a function of the structure you're within, right?
Well, the underlying structure of anything will determine its behavior. And what we found, what I discovered in the 80s was what I call macrostructural patterns, which is people have patterns in their lives which are predictable. And there's two types of patterns. One is an oscillating pattern, in which you set out for something, maybe you have it for a period of time, and then there's a reversal. And at the end of the story, you no longer have the thing that you set out for. And there's an underlying structure that gives rise to that pattern of behavior. And then the second pattern is that you set out for something and you accomplish it, and that then becomes the platform for future creations, and there's no reversal, and it just becomes a pattern of success.
What I personally also recognize, there are some people who don't believe they're creative, yeah, that they think just what they believe is like how life is, and then others, they have their idea of creativity, and in the context of structure, it's like, oh, this is weird, this is a misnomer, structural creating or structural thinking or structural creativity. So it's like there seems to be many perspectives on our
but
creative
if you really want to,
abilities.
there's not many perspectives in the arts. You know, it isn't like, oh, my C, you know, musical C and your C. You got the same C, or otherwise you're playing out of tune. And so there's a lot of misconceptions, and it doesn't matter about what you believe. It doesn't matter about your attitudes. I mean, these are all the sort of self-help things that make up for not understanding what the real dynamics are in play. You know, if you change your attitude, you'll be okay. Well, if you're in the same structure, you change your attitude, you're going to end up in the same place. And we can see this in the predictable patterns in people's lives, no matter what. And sometimes those patterns, works really well for a while and then it doesn't. And the underlying structure of anything will determine its behavior. For example, when you walk into a building, it's the structure of the building that enables you or guides you or gives rise to your pattern of behavior where you walk. Or do you get on the elevator? Do you get on the escalator? How do you move from point A to point B? The structure of the building will determine that path. And that's how it is in organizations. That's how it is in our lives. That's how it is in the world. It's physics. It's just not metaphysics. It's physics. And you named in my first book, The Path of Least Resistance. And some people who haven't read the book misunderstand the title, thinking that I'm describing the easy way out. But I'm actually describing the scientific principle of energy moves where it's easiest for it to go. And what will determine where it goes is the underlying structure. So we have a riverbed, which determines where the water flows. And let's say the first principle is energy moves along the path of least resistance. The second principle is it's the underlying structure that determines that path, like the water going through the riverbed. And the third principle is we can change the underlying structure. If you change the underlying structure, you change the path of least resistance. Now, why that's important is because people try to change circumstances and they try to change events and they try to change situations and they think situationally, not structurally. So eventually what will happen is they'll react to the circumstance, not understand what causes it, have a solution to a problem, and then the next thing they know, they're back in the same type of situation again, not understanding why it happened.
So would you say it's really taking the point of reference from the outside to the inside?
And what do you mean by that question?
Instead of making one's decision dependent on external circumstances or expectations or beliefs, which, like most of our beliefs, are absorbed from outside. So it's basically living by, you could say, if
you have what you're trying to do to me, for me, is describe your theory of how it goes, which I'm about to disagree with.
Okay.
So,
awesome. Yeah, perfect.
Well, look, whether the structures are internal or external, and structure is structure.
Okay.
Now, what is structure? Structure is another singular thing, which has elements. And the elements combine together in a single structure. And that structure has, I'm going to make it very specifically scientific for a moment. It has a state of equilibrium or non-equilibrium, or if you're a purist, degrees removed from equilibrium, since equilibrium is a pure state. And anything less than equilibrium creates a dynamic. So in terms of whether it's internal or external, it doesn't matter. Its structure strives for equilibrium. Now, that doesn't mean equilibrium is a good or bad thing. It's just like gravity. You think about gravity, is it good, is it bad? Well, we're really happy to have it here on Earth. Otherwise, we'd probably have some problems. But, it's a force in play. That's all it is. It's a force in play. Now, we can strategically use that force by creating states of non-equilibrium, like this archer stretching the bow, aiming the arrow toward the target. Most often what happens is people have conflicts of interest in which there's a shift of dominance between wanting to create something, and other things that are going on, like maybe their concepts. Let's say they have a concept that they're not good enough. So they don't know necessarily they have that idea, but let's say they do. It's an assumption they make. They just don't know it's even there. Because they create an ideal to compensate for that concept, which of course is to be good enough, to be good at whatever it is. And, so they have this ideal they try to live up to. But now there's something they want to create. They create that thing. Now they've accomplished that thing, and that tension resolution system has resolved. And there's a competing one which says you're not good enough. So I've got this thing, but I'm not good enough to have it. No, this is not psychology. This is structure. This doesn't have to do with whether or not they're good enough either. It's just that this assumption is inconsistent with the accomplishment of the outcome. And so that conflict then forces a movement away from where you want to be. And that creates that oscillating pattern where you first have it and then somehow systematically you don't have it. Now, it's not about you having the right internal, stuff going on. It's not about you finding yourself. It's not about becoming a better person. It's not about being finding your purpose in life. It's not about resolving your relationship with your parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not any of those things. It's that the underlying structure of anything will determine its behavior. And in many people's lives, they have come to certain conclusions about life that they don't know they've come to, which then become built into the structure, it becomes one of the elements in the structure. But they also want things. They want good health. They want good quality of life. No matter what you think about yourself, and this is where the self-esteem people have really gone totally wrong, is they think it matters what you think about yourself. And they have never seemed to have read a biography of successful people in their life. Because if they had, they would find that every single one of them had low self-esteem. You name it, Winston Churchill, Mother Teresa, Elvis, it doesn't matter who it was, they actually all had low self-esteem, but they weren't thinking about themselves. They were thinking about what they wanted to create. And it doesn't matter what you think about yourself in relationship to, you want good health, you want good relationships, you want meaningful work, you want a good quality of life. Who do you have to be to want those things? The question is not who do you have to be? The question is, do you know how to create those things? Now, people who have created a lot know how to create. You might say, well, there are some artists who are brilliant at their artwork, but their lives are terrible. How come? And the answer is they're not using the same process in their life as they are in their art. They do their life one way, they do their art a different way. When you do your life the same way you do your art, then your life changes. Did you have a follow-up question, given I've tried to?
No, it makes me, no. I follow that. And one thing I saw that you are facilitating or organizing these events with the and I put the name down, Zen Master Isho Fujita, where you kind of connect living creatively or structural thinking with Zen. So that was quite interesting, and I would be curious to hear about what's the connection there. Or
well, we do this once a year. We do a seminar together, and the thing that I like about Zen, and it's not Buddhism, by the way, and so I'm not a Zen Buddhist. I actually like Zen, and what I like about Zen is, maybe in the story that I'm going to tell you, these Zen master disciple stories are always one-upmanship stories, So I've got a good one for you. So there's two disciples. One is a disciple of a guy who does all kinds of mystical things, and the other is a disciple of a Zen master. So the disciple of the mystical guy says, well, my master can produce wheat from his hands, and he can levitate, and he can do all these miracles. And the Zen disciple is listening patiently and respectfully. And then he talks about his master, and he said, my master, when he sleeps, he sleeps. When he eats, he eats. When he walks, he walks. And it's this notion of being right in that moment. which is what happens in the creative process. Is you don't have to think of it as Zen as a philosophy, because it's not really a philosophy that I'm describing. It's actually a practice, it's a skill. And sometimes I describe it as observation without commentary. In other words, you're looking at things, but you're not interpreting them. You're just taking them in exactly as they are. Now, in the creative process, when I said you got the outcome, you have vision of the outcome, you have current reality. Well, clarity in the current reality means you're seeing it exactly for what it is, warts and all, whatever it is, in relationship to what it is you want to create. And that's sort of like, in a nutshell, the 2-hour seminar we had.
Yeah, that got my mind thinking. You could also say that like this, like the creative process, or what you just shared to me, that it's realizing more and more that my thoughts and what I'm feeling is not a reflection of like reality in a sense, and in that sense also like becoming more aware of.
Yeah, there's it's this understanding of raising your level of awareness of what's going on. And there's a story that I tell in some of my books about a painter named Arthur Stern, who teaches color paint. He teaches students how to see color. And he wrote a wonderful book called Color, How to See It and Paint It. First, you've got to see it, and then you've got to paint it. So he brought a group of his students down to the shores of the Hudson River. And he pointed across and he said, "What colors do you see?" And the student said, "Well, the Brook building is red and the tower is white and the other building is yellow," and they had different colors. And then he passed out a card. Let me see if I can create one. He passed out a card that it's kind of like this. It's a card with a hole in it. Let's see if I can get this hole a little better. So you can imagine, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
and he had the students hold it up against the background. He said, "Okay, now tell me what colors you see." And they all got very quiet until somebody said blue. Everything over there is blue. Now, the reason it was blue is because on hazy days, you don't see the color of objects in the distance. You see the atmosphere between you and the object, which, by the way, was the whole point of Impressionism painting. Is they weren't painting objects. They were painting the air between the painter and the objects. But he goes on to say, why were they thinking they were seeing red and white and orange or yellow? He said that student artists substitute a concept of what they should see on what they are seeing. He says the mind gets in the way of the eye. And part of the training in art, this is in music, this is in painting, this is in drawing, this is the tradition of the arts, has a lot of discipline around seeing exactly what's there, independent of anything you might otherwise think. And you think about how you're looking at something and it's actually blue, but you think you're seeing colors. The mind is imposing your concept of reality on reality. So when I'm talking about raising your level of awareness, it really is being able to see what's there independent of your concepts. So your concepts aren't a filter or a lens by which you distort reality.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I really agree with myself.
Yeah, I'm no judge, but yeah, and you also mentioned that, I don't know, is there a spiritual perspective to this? I don't know, that you mentioned
No.
also the like one.
The answer is no. The answer is no.
Okay.
I want to tell you why the answer is no. It's really important. Why the answer is no is because the creative process is philosophically neutral. Any belief system, anybody from any belief system or political spectrum or economic spectrum can create. There have been masters of the creative process who believed all kinds of things. Now, I make a distinction between what I call the belief business and the creating business. And in the belief business, it's important what you believe. And the major activity in the belief business is conversion. Convert people to the belief. And then the second major activity is to act in ways that are consistent with whatever the belief is. That's the belief business. In the creating business, it doesn't matter what you believe. Period. It doesn't matter what you believe. The same way it doesn't matter what you believe in learning how to drive a car. It's like, oh, only if you have this belief you drive a car, and if you don't believe that, you can't drive as well.
if you would define spirituality in a way that it is about like what is and like taking away the concepts, etc., maybe then
it's not spirituality.
Okay.
Spirituality usually includes an idea of progress, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess there's a whole spectrum of different concepts and beliefs.
Can you tell me? Well, can you tell me anything that's in the realm of spirituality that doesn't have the notion that people can be better than they currently are?
My own discovery led me to the point that there is nothing to be achieved. Yeah, in a sense, it is just like it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but that's not spirituality. By the way, I'm not against religion.
Yeah,
just to say, I'm not against religion or spirituality. But I don't agree with the idea that you have to become a better person. Which most, in the East and the West, it's almost like the notion is you're not okay the way you are. And you have to perfect yourself or improve, or if you don't improve, then you're going to have many lifetimes burning off your karma, or you'll end up in the East, in the West, you'll end up in heaven or in hell or in purgatory or whatever. And it's like this is how it is in the arts. In the arts, imperfection is seen as better than perfection. My composition teacher used to say, it's the flaw in the crystal that makes the crystal more interesting.
And would you say that this is the problem, that we want to fix problems, that this is I don't know, this is the state of suffering in the world, or that this is the source of suffering? I don't know, that we are fixing problems and creating new problems through that.
Yeah, I don't know if we could describe in a nutshell, the source of suffering in the world. but it's, for me, just to say from my point of view, I'm not trying to save the world. I'm trying to share a good thing. And it's a very different motivation. And I think people are just fine the way they are. And I don't mind imperfection, or in fact, I like that people have all kinds of weird things they are and do. And from the standpoint of the arts, that's more interesting. It's like, okay, it's like, that's the human condition.
Yeah.
But there are possibilities that often we are not able to know about, like creating. And when you find out what it is and how to do it, you actually can organize your life around those things that matter most to you. And this is not corresponding to some belief system, which is always the promise is if you fall into the belief system, you'll have a better life, either now or in the future. Versus, you begin to learn how to organize your life about your highest aspirations and your deepest values and things that matter to you. There's no guarantee you can create it, but your chances go up when you know how to create.
Yeah, you shared this this film, the Uganda project, with me, which is incredible. Yeah, and
thank you.
That yeah, it seems to that gives the perspective on problem fixing versus
Yeah.
possibly actual solutions. And
Yeah. The point that you're making, which is I think a really important one, is that there's a difference between problem solving and creating. In problem solving, you're taking action to have something go away, the problem.
mhm, 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 mhm,
And in creating, you're taking action to have something come into being, the creation.
mhm,
By the way, the
mhm,
only difference
mhm,
there is sometimes the word problem solving in math and in science is not the usual problem solving where we're trying to get rid of something.
mhm,
That's
mhm,
different. But in terms of uh, the a good example of that is in the developing world, for example, in Africa. And the agencies that would go in would always go in to try to fix a problem.
mhm,
And what we did, and we've been doing this for over 30 years, is working with Ugandans in an organization there with a leader named Musheshi, who was trained with us. And then we've been working with them for over 30 years in creating development based on the creative process. And they've tens of thousands of people. They've had incredible impact. No matter what the circumstances were, they were
mhm,
able to go and develop. They were teaching families how to create over the next 5 years, what do they want? And almost all of them did, in fact, create better lives over 5 years. They have the first women's college there now, where they're teaching these principles. And the women who learn go into villages and they take the whole village through a process of the creative process. So the village will decide what do they want, where are they now, what actions do they need to take, who's going to take them. And so instead of a problem solving approach, let's get rid of these bad things, they're building, building, building. And they are also, this is one of the advantages of it being philosophically neutral. There were people from all kinds of philosophical and religious and spiritual traditions that in the past would have not worked together.
mhm,
And now they do work together on their own common interest. And because no one's trying to convert anybody,
mhm.
we're just joining together on behalf of outcomes we all want.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I
Yeah.
will share the movie
Oh, please do. Yeah.
with this conversation so that everybody
Yeah,
who's
please do,
interested,
because
please
I think
watch it. It's really interesting.
and
Yeah, and
these the girls who go to the girls' school are from some of the most, there's some families in the areas, and they know that's where they start from. That's not where they end up.
hmm. And one of one of what I take from what you're sharing, it is not about a belief system, but it's about premises. On the one hand, maybe discarding the wrong premises or not helpful assumptions, but then
Well, may I say, it's not about discarding anything. It's about
okay,
looking at reality and getting it right. And
becoming
if it,
aware of the assumptions as assumption, not as a fact.
if in reality your concepts don't hold up to scrutiny, then
Mhm,
you don't have to discard them. You can't
mhm,
hold on to them.
mhm, 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 mhm. And
You know, it's like, gee, hey, there's no such thing as a car. And then there's the car. You say, wait a second, I may have been wrong about there's no such thing as a car.
okay, yes, I get it. But what I wanted to aim at is that in this film, a premise you are using or you seem to be using is mentioned, which is people have aspirations. They do care about their lives, about those um, along those lines. And
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's the word premise that I don't think is quite correct.
okay.
I think it's an observation that people have aspirations,
Mhm, mhm,
isn't it? I mean, don't we just know that? I mean, sometimes some people have higher aspirations than others. It's a very
mhm,
personal thing.
mhm,
There's no right or wrong. It's not like the person who has high aspirations is better than the person who
mhm,
has lower. You have what you have. It's your life.
mhm,
But people have aspirations and they have values. We can observe that. And the question then becomes, have they organized their life around those aspirations and values. And so you see what I mean? It's not quite a premise. It is an observation. And if you ran into somebody who didn't want to create anything, well, you know what? The creative process is not for that person. The creative process is for people who want to create things.
So possibly everybody could, but not everybody
might want to.
Is inspired to or wants to. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And you mentioned before that you also worked with organizations or changing systems in a way. And in which regard is that different to working with individuals? In
some, yeah, it's depending on the leadership of the organization, it actually can be easier than working with individuals, because you're not up against individual belief systems per se. And it's easier to be objective in relationship to what's going on. But it's the underlying structure that will determine whether the organization is moving forward or oscillating. And what we've seen over the past 20, 30, 40 years is organizations build up capacity and downsize, and build up capacity and downsize. Centralized decision-making, decentralized decision-making, centralized, decentralized, acquire companies, divest, acquire, divest. And the oscillation are pretty predictable. I mean, they're usually between 2 and 5 years, or 7 years, depending on whether they change leadership. And what we've done with organizations is made structural tension the primary organizing principle, so that you have, people are really focused on end results, current reality. And then they're also focused on, what am I doing here that supports what they're doing over there, that supports what's doing over there. So it becomes like a relational database rather than a non-relational database. So that people I think of it as a composition. I wonder why.
Sounds familiar.
But, but in the composition, you have major themes, you have minor themes, you have accompaniment. In a composition, you have the parts fit together and support each other. Now, before they organize that way, often it's problem driven, so they're busily solving problems. It tends to be fragmented, so things don't fit together. I think a good test of an organization that's not well organized is if the people in the organization are competing against each other for the same resource base. That means they don't understand how to manage their capacity. It's almost like a bad composition.
I have to admit, every company I worked for was organized around competition.
Yeah, but see, probably never worked for any that we worked with.
No,
and
I didn't.
There's a different. It's so interesting to see that transition. And by the way, the book, if people are interested in that, for me, the book that I recommend is The Path of Least Resistance for Managers.
Okay.
The 2011 version, because I rewrote it and I updated it, and the 2000 version has a lot there about leadership and lean management. I rethought lean management as a proposition of efficiency and so on. And and you can run a whole company from that book, Path of Least Resistance for Managers.
So it, in a nutshell, it's really like the CEO or the leader of the company is all which is required to facilitate change. It trickles down through the whole company.
It's not necessarily trickles down. It's a good leader will lead people to join together on behalf of the organization's work. And a bad leader will allow fragmentation where people fight it out against each other, usually on the vice presidential level.
and those principles, they then also apply to states, nations, international corporations.
Although nations are much more complicated than organizations.
Have you had the the opportunity to work with, I don't know, governments or?
Yeah. Yeah, we've worked with departments in the United States. We've worked with many departments of government. Right now, there's a course that we offer that is a video-based course, and it's a 3-month course, and there's a lesson every day.
Mhm.
And the United States Army is using that course to help transition military people into civilian life,
Hmm.
so that they can have a better chance when they leave the military to organize their life in a more fundamental way than otherwise they would be left to their own devices.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That's, yeah, that seems to be an education which is yeah, which is
Helpful,
very helpful and
helpful
actually
for many different kinds of
empowering. Yeah,
yeah,
like
I think so. Yeah.
which
Well, what do we know? We know the creative process is
hmm,
the most successful process for accomplishment in history.
hmm,
It's
hmm,
created all of the arts, science, technology,
hmm,
and yet we don't learn it in school.
hmm.
But when you start to apply the creative process to any um, area of life, it has tremendous advantages.
Yeah, in the film you could see the families sharing about their creations or improvements or changes in their lives, and they seemed on fire. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
myself have been in Uganda and Kenya and
Okay. Yeah.
Rwanda and Tanzania, and people are so nice, so amazing. But then also their circumstances, there are, yeah, they're not, yeah, not
They don't
very
have some of
well.
the
Yeah, usually.
benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have some of the benefits we
Mhm.
enjoy, but
Mhm.
so here are people with a different set of circumstances who, because of the creative process, can build their lives in a quite different way than it
Mhm.
usually happens. But you know, the thing about it is every culture has the arts.
Mhm.
So I would go to, let's say I would go to Brazil and be working with a management company there. And they would say, but Robert, you have to understand that here in Brazil, we do, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they go on about how Brazil is different than other places.
Yeah.
And I would say to them, you're listening to the wrong people. I actually played with a lot of Brazilian musicians. I said, you're not listening to your artists. You should listen to how the arts are done in Brazil. I mean, Brazil's got one of the most incredible television, creative television. I don't know what to call it, but you know, they
Mhm.
do television like it's like nowhere else.
Mhm.
I mean, the music in Brazil is incredible and original. And you know, you go anywhere I would go, I'd go to Germany and they'd say, we have to understand, Robert, here in Germany. And as it happens, I studied music in Germany.
Is it? Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, so people often, their reference points are, they think of the arts as just kind of talented people doing weird things,
Yeah.
rather than there's a discipline there. And every culture has it. And if you take the same discipline that you use to make a painting or make a film, and you begin to use that in your organizations or in your personal life, that becomes an important reference point. And you can see how it's not only is it philosophically neutral, but it's culturally neutral.
Yeah, also my wife is from Mexico, and I've been many times to Mexico, and I always am surprised about the creativity of
Oh,
the
Mexico,
Mexicans. Yeah, they're
totally
literally
great.
making something out of nothing. Yeah, they like they fix
Right.
cars. They I don't know, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah. And there's
mhm.
some wonderful artists that come from Mexico too, films and paintings and music and great. Yeah, colors. The colors there are so different. Ideas of colors there are so different.
And
Not to mention cuisine. You know, this
yeah.
is another thing. Is I wrote an article once saying the difference between chefs and politicians,
Mhm.
where chefs really, you know, they make things, they improve, they learn,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, they have an outcome in mind. Politicians don't do that.
Mhm. And yeah, I mean, what I also like discovered myself, I had this like this preconception about what creativity must look like. Yeah, it must be like painting or like artists, like sculptures or whatever. But that I might have my own creative like
Yeah.
style or like way of
Well, aren't
expressing my
there,
creativity.
but in real life though, Simon,
Mhm.
aren't there things you want to create?
Absolutely, yes,
So,
yes, yes.
all right. Now, I'm the
Mhm.
cook in the family.
Mhm.
So my wife's a wonderful cook, but she doesn't like doing it. And I love cooking. So I cook every night. So every night I have
Mhm.
structural tension. Here's the outcome.
Mhm.
Here's where I am.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm always in a continual learning modality. So I'm learning more and more and more how to be better at it. But that's the creative process. And it's not about the subject matter of the creative process. Could be the arts, could be food, could be making a room in your house. It could be building a house. It could be making a fence. It could be doing a garden. Um, could be making a career. Could be developing a business. Those are all subject matter of the creative, or could be subject matter of the creative process.
And I'm not sure if I'm putting this together now, but in one of your videos you shared or are available on your website, like if I recall it correctly, you said like to start you don't need anything. Yeah, you not even need a hypothesis about how
Yeah.
things work.
Well, more
Like,
than that, it's like we think we've been taught the scientific process is you start with a hypothesis and
yes, yes, yeah.
and Newton said, Sir Isaac Newton said,
Mhm.
hypotheses have no place in science.
Mhm.
And Descartes said, to understand phenomena, first rid yourself of all preconceptions. So that notion is no matter what you've learned, put it aside, start with nothing. And then maybe you can rethink. Look, if what you thought is true, it'll show up to be true again.
Mhm.
But if what you thought wasn't true, you'll see, oh, I thought this, but it turns out there's no evidence for that. And there is evidence for something else. And so there's a guy who wrote a book called Ignorance, and he
Mhm.
teaches neuroscience at Columbia. And his
Mhm.
point is, and he really demolishes the whole thing we learned about hypothesis and scientific process. He said, science teachers and journalists talk about that. It's not how it really works. He said, when scientists get together, they talk about what they don't know, not what they know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like listening to this, it sounds so obvious, yeah, but embodying that or applying it or using it, that might take a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, the reason it sounds obvious and you haven't thought of this way before is that there's a lot of unlearning that
Mhm.
takes place. We've been inundated with all kinds of ideas
Mhm.
that turn out not to be helpful or even true.
Yeah.
And, but if you say it like I'm describing it, I mean, it becomes, of course, that's how it would go.
Mhm.
It's not like some crazy weird thing. The only reason it's revolutionary is it contradicts all the stupid things we learned.
It's like, oh man, like what did I do in the past? Yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, and then I think if you recall that right, it's also like important to picture or to vividly imagine what that vision
helpful.
might look
Yeah,
like. Yeah.
yeah, it's helpful to have a visual frame of reference. It's
Hmm.
helpful.
Well, yeah, Mr. Fritz, yeah, yeah, it was a real pleasure to get to know you and to have this
Thank you. You
conversation.
too.
Is there something you want to share with our audience? A last final word or
Uh,
another koan?
well, I want to, just thank you for the conversation. And people can find my books on Amazon
Yeah.
or um, go to our website, www.robertfritz.com. And And just to say that we're, as I said before, we're really trying to share a good thing. And it doesn't matter what you come in believing, because we're not a belief system. We're not trying to substitute one belief system for another. This is more of a skill set. And also an orientation. You know, creating is an orientation.
Yeah, thank you. So I will add all your webpage and the links to your books. We'll add to the conversation so that everybody could look that up directly. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. And yeah, also to you, thank you very much for being curious and open-minded. So thank you for being with us, and see you next time.
Pleasure.
Fokus schafft Realität, das haben wir alles schon mal gehört, aber was bedeutet das genau? Ja, das heißt, dass wir ursächlich sind für unsere Lebenserfahrung, für jeden einzelnen Moment, ob wir glücklich, freudig, erfüllt oder vielleicht gestresst, ängstlich, frustriert sind. Ja, unser Fokus entscheidet, denn er schafft unsere Erfahrung. Es hört sich vielleicht simpel an, aber ja, die Frage ist, wie funktioniert das? Ja, worauf sind wir tatsächlich fokussiert und wie können wir unseren Fokus vielleicht ein Stück weit weiter schärfen, um statt auf Angst und Mangel, externe Bedingungen gerichtet zu sein, ganz bewusst den Fokus zu setzen auf das, was wir wahrhaftig sind und lieben, was uns Freude bereitet, um eben genau mehr davon in unser Leben zu bringen und wirklich kreativ und inspiriert zu leben. Ja, und diesen Fragen werden wir uns im Seminar Strukturelle Kreativität widmen und auf den Grund gehen. Wer neugierig ist und sich angesprochen fühlt, der sei hierzu herzlich eingeladen. Ja, mehr Informationen findet ihr über diesen Link. Lasst uns die spannende Entdeckungsreise beginnen. Ich freue mich.